Chapter 1. The Emperor's Obsession. The grand halls of the Drakensval Empire were bathed in golden candlelight, their towering marble pillars stretching endlessly toward the heavens. The air was thick with the scent of rare spices and the whispers of nobles, all gathered in the imperial court for another night of feasts and politics. At the head of it all, upon his obsidian throne, sat Emperor Dorian Everhart. A ruler of unmatched power, Dorian was a man both feared and worshipped. His piercing crimson eyes bore into those before him, his very presence suffocating. He had built his empire on the blood of his enemies, and none dared defy him. None, except for one. Among the countless palace servants attending to the gathering, Dorian's gaze locked onto a single figure, a young man moving gracefully through the court, balancing a tray of wine with practiced ease. Dorian had noticed him before, but tonight something about the servant made his blood hum, with an unfamiliar, restless energy. Rin? He was beautiful, almost ethereal, with golden eyes that gleamed like molten sunlight beneath the glow of the chandeliers. His dark, silky hair fell in loose strands around his face, framing features so striking they could rival the celestial beings of legend. But it was not just his appearance that captivated the Emperor. It was the defiance in his gaze, the way he carried himself as though he belonged among the nobles rather than serving them. "Bring him to me." Dorian's command was spoken softly, but it held the weight of an unbreakable law. The guards moved without hesitation, striding across the hall toward the servant. Rin barely had time to react before a firm grip clasped his wrist, halting his movements. He turned, eyes narrowing as he met the gaze of the imperial guards. "The Emperor summons you," one of them announced. A hush fell over the court as all eyes turned toward the unfolding scene. Servants rarely, if ever, were summoned before the Emperor personally. It was an honor, or a curse. And yet, Rin's expression remained unreadable. He exhaled slowly and nodded, setting down his tray before following the guards toward the towering throne. Dorian's eyes darkened with an emotion even he couldn't fully comprehend as Rin was brought before him. The servant knelt out of forced custom, but there was no fear in his posture, only quiet defiance. "What is your name?" Dorian asked, his voice smooth but laced with quiet authority. "Rin, your majesty," the servant replied, lifting his gaze to meet the Emperor's without hesitation. "Bold," Dorian's lips curled into an amused smirk. "You do not bow as low as the others," he noted, his tone deceptively soft. Rin's golden eyes flickered, something unreadable passing through them. "Forgive me, your majesty. My body is not as flexible as the others," he said, voice light with a hint of mockery. Murmurs rippled through the court. No one spoke to the Emperor in such a manner and lived to tell the tale. And yet, instead of anger, Dorian felt something far more dangerous curling in his chest. Amusement, intrigue, obsession. He leaned forward slightly, resting his chin against his knuckles. "Is that so?" Rin did not lower his gaze. "Yes, your majesty." Dorian chuckled, a rare sound that sent a shiver down the spines of those gathered. The court knew that when the Emperor was amused, it often led to something far more terrifying than anger. Interesting," he mused. "You may rise." Rin did so, though his wariness was carefully hidden behind an unreadable mask. Dorian studied him for a long moment before making a decision he himself barely understood. "You will no longer serve in the main halls." Rin's heart skipped a beat. Had he gone too far? Was he being dismissed? Instead, Dorian's next words sent a chill down his spine. "From now on, you are to serve me personally." The court gasped in unison. Servants did not attend to the Emperor directly unless they were consorts or prisoners. And by the look in Dorian's eyes, Rin knew he had just become something far more dangerous. The Emperor's newest obsession. As the night drew on, Rin was led to a lavish chamber within the imperial palace, a place he knew he could never leave now that Dorian had set his sights on him, but he could not afford to be careless. He was not truly a servant, after all. He was Prince Soren Nightbane of Lunareth, heir to the kingdom that stood against the Drakensval Empire. And now, he was caught in the Emperor's web. But Soren was no helpless prey. A slow, cunning smirk curved his lips as he gazed at the extravagant room prepared for him. Let the game begin. Chapter 2. The Emperor's Claim. Soren barely had time to adjust to his new surroundings before the doors to his chamber swung open with an unceremonious force. He turned, golden eyes sharp, as Emperor Dorian strode in, his crimson gaze burning with something far more dangerous than curiosity. Possession. You are mine now, Dorian declared, his voice a deep growl of finality. Soren tilted his head, feigning innocence. Am I, Your Majesty? Dorian closed the distance between them with slow, deliberate steps, his towering presence suffocating. He reached out, fingers brushing against Soren's chin, tilting it upward. Do not toy with me, Rin. Soren's lips twitched, but he did not pull away. I would never dare. Lies? Dorian could sense them as easily as he could feel the rapid pulse beneath Soren's skin. His fingers tightened just slightly, enough to remind the so-called servant who held the power between them. You will serve me, and only me, Dorian murmured, his voice like velvet over steel. You will wear the silks I give you, eat only what I provide, and stay within my sight at all times. Soren's heart pounded, but he merely lowered his lashes, playing the obedient servant. As you wish, Your Majesty. But within, his mind was already spinning with plans. The Emperor had made his claim. Now, it was Soren's turn to make his move. The chamber given to him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Vast and opulent, its walls were lined with intricate gold carvings depicting past emperors of Drakensval. Thick velvet drapes cascaded over towering windows, filtering the evening light into a warm glow. At the center stood a massive four-poster bed, adorned with silk sheets, softer than anything Soren had ever touched. A gilded cage. The realization settled heavily in his chest. This was not a gift, it was confinement. Soren walked to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtains. The imperial palace stretched far beyond his view, its spires reaching into the sky like the talons of a beast. Even if he ran, where would he go? The palace was heavily guarded, and he had no allies here. Not yet. As he pondered his next move, the door creaked open once more. A servant entered, bowing deeply. His Majesty has ordered that you be bathed and dressed appropriately. The garments have been prepared. Soren raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smirk. How thoughtful of him. The servant did not meet his gaze, only gesturing toward an adjoining chamber where steam curled through the open doorway. A bath, then. He supposed he had little choice. Later that evening, Soren stood before a full-length mirror, examining his reflection. The silk robes draped over his frame were impossibly fine, the deep red fabric embroidered with delicate gold filigree. The garment was clearly meant to mark him as belonging to the Emperor. The thought made his blood simmer. A knock at the door drew his attention. He turned just as Dorian stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over Soren with blatant satisfaction. You wear my colors well, the Emperor remarked. Soren exhaled slowly, willing his heartbeat to remain steady. And if I refused? Dorian's smile was slow, dangerous. Then I would have you wear nothing at all. Heat flared in Soren's cheeks, but he refused to be rattled. He met Dorian's gaze steadily. You are bold, Your Majesty. The Emperor chuckled, stepping closer. And you are fearless. He reached out, fingers grazing Soren's collarbone. A dangerous trait, little one. Soren held his ground. Only to those who have something to fear. Dorian's amusement darkened into something more possessive. You think I fear you? Soren leaned in just slightly, his breath ghosting over the Emperor's skin. I think you fear losing me? A beat of silence. Then Dorian's grip tightened, his hand sliding to cup the back of Soren's neck. You are not wrong. His thumb brushed over Soren's pulse, feeling the quickened rhythm beneath his skin. But understand this. Whether you love me or hate me, you will stay by my side. Soren's golden eyes burned with defiance. "And if I try to leave?" Dorian's smile was slow, predatory. "Then I will burn the world until I find you." Soren swallowed, his heart hammering. For the first time he realized the depth of the Emperor's obsession. It was not merely desire. It was something far more dangerous. Something that could consume them both. And yet, as he gazed into Dorian's crimson eyes, something deep within him stirred. Perhaps he had underestimated his captor after all. That night, Soren lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. His mind churned with thoughts of escape, of deception, of the Emperor's relentless pursuit. But beneath it all, a single question lingered. How far would Dorian go to keep him? Soren suspected he was about to find out. Chapter 3: The Vanishing of the Queen. For 1 month, Soren remained in the gilded cage that was the Drakensval Imperial Palace. 1 month of lavish gifts, whispered promises, and Dorian's relentless pursuit. The Emperor left nothing to chance. He adorned Soren in the rarest silks, gifted him priceless jewels, and even built a private garden in his name. He spoke of devotion, of love, of a future where Soren would never have to lift a finger. And Soren played his role to perfection. He smiled when necessary, let Dorian pull him into his arms, allowed stolen kisses along his wrist and throat. He let the Emperor believe he was melting under the weight of his affections, that soon he would belong to him entirely. But behind those golden eyes, Soren counted the days. And when the time came, he vanished like a ghost in the night. Dorian woke to an unusual silence. The palace always had movement, servants flitting about, guards stationed at every corner. But this morning, something was wrong. His arms, which had been accustomed to holding Soren through the night, were empty. His heart pounded. He sat up abruptly, eyes scanning the room. The silk sheets were slightly rumpled, but Soren's presence was gone. No trace of him remained, not even the scent of his delicate perfume. Panic surged through him. He tore through the halls like a storm, his voice thundering through the palace. "Find him, now!" Servants cowered, guards scrambled, and the highest-ranked officials in the Empire were summoned to his chambers within minutes. But no one had seen anything. No one knew how Soren had vanished. The palace was locked tight at night. The guards always stationed outside his chambers, yet his queen was gone. A cold, dangerous silence settled over the Emperor. And then, the storm broke. Dorian's fury was unlike anything the Empire had ever witnessed. He ordered every servant who had ever stepped foot near Soren to be interrogated. Those who hesitated to answer were executed on the spot. He tore apart the palace brick by brick, looking for any sign of his beloved's whereabouts. He sent his armies marching into the villages, demanding information. Those who lied, he had burned. Those who hid the truth, he had their families slaughtered. His desperation turned to madness, his obsession spiraling into something uncontrollable. For days, he neither slept nor ate. His throne remained cold, his court dismissed. The Empire was left in a state of chaos, all because of the disappearance of one man. His queen, his love, his everything. And then, the truth finally came to light. A scout returned, trembling before the Emperor. "Your Majesty, Rin was never a mere servant." Dorian's red eyes burned. "Speak." The scout swallowed hard. "He is Prince Soren Nightbane, heir to the kingdom of Lunareth. He infiltrated the palace in disguise, to gather intelligence." For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, Dorian laughed. A dark, hollow sound, one that sent shivers down the spines of those in the room. His fingers curled around the arms of his throne, knuckles turning white. "Prince Soren," he murmured, tasting the name on his tongue. A name he should have known, a name that belonged to his enemy. But enemy or not, it did not change the truth in Dorian's heart. Soren belonged to him, and he would get him back, no matter the cost. Chapter 4: The Price of Peace. Dorian would bring him back, no matter the cost. The moment Soren disappeared, the Emperor of Drakensval did not waste time. His armies stormed into Lunareth, not to wage war, but to send a message. The bloodshed would stop, but only under one condition. Prince Soren Nightbane would become his queen. The court of Lunareth was thrown into chaos. Their heir, who had only just returned from his mission, was now the bargaining chip for peace. The council debated, the generals argued, but in the end, the choice was Soren's to make. And Soren, ever the strategist, knew this was an opportunity he could not ignore. For years, their kingdoms had been at war, their people suffering, their lands soaked in blood. Dorian's demand was outrageous, possessive, and undeniably selfish, but it was also the only way to end their carnage. So, Soren agreed, not for love, not for devotion, but because he wanted to see just how far Emperor Dorian Everhart would go for him. The grand halls of the Drakensval Palace were adorned in gold and crimson, celebrating the union that would change history. Nobles whispered behind jeweled masks, courtiers gossiped in hushed tones, and at the center of it all stood Dorian dressed in regal black and red, his gaze locked onto the man who had once slipped through his fingers. Soren was breathtaking in his ceremonial robes, woven with silver threads, the color of moonlight, the mark of Lunareth's royal bloodline. He met Dorian's gaze with a smirk, amusement flickering behind his golden eyes. "You finally got what you wanted," Soren murmured as he stood before the emperor. "Tell me, your majesty, was it worth it?" Dorian reached out, taking Soren's chin between his fingers. "I will let you decide that for yourself, my queen." The title sent a shiver down Soren's spine, not from fear but from the undeniable weight of what it meant. He was no longer a spy, no longer just a prince of Lunareth. He was the consort of the most powerful ruler in the world. His chains were no longer invisible. They were woven into the very vows he was about to take. And yet, Soren smiled, because now he would see the depths of Dorian's love, the extent of his madness. And perhaps, just perhaps, he would find something else buried beneath it all. Something neither of them expected. Chapter 5. The Depths of Devotion. 2 months had passed since their union, and Dorian's love had not wavered. If anything, it had grown deeper, darker, more consuming with each passing day. He treated Soren like the most precious jewel in the empire, draping him in silks, lavishing him with affection, ensuring that his every whim was fulfilled before the words could even leave his lips. But Soren was not a man who could be won with gifts and sweet words alone. He wanted to see the extent of Dorian's love, how far the emperor was willing to go for him. And soon he got his answer. It happened one evening during a grand banquet. The hall was filled with nobles, dignitaries, and foreign guests, all gathered to celebrate the newfound peace between Lunareth and Drakensval. Soren sat beside Dorian, adorned in royal blue, his golden eyes watching everything with keen amusement. Then chaos erupted. A dagger flew through the air, aimed directly at Soren's heart. But it never reached him. Dorian moved faster than anyone could react, catching the assassin's wrist in a bone-crushing grip. The room fell into stunned silence as the emperor rose from his seat, his expression void of mercy. Without hesitation, without a single word, he snapped the man's neck, letting the lifeless body crumple to the ground. Then his wrath descended upon the hall. Guards stormed in, dragging out anyone remotely suspicious. Dorian did not stop at executing just the assassin. He hunted down the conspirators, their families, anyone who had even the slightest connection to the attempt on his queen's life. Blood painted the palace floors, the scent of death lingering in the air for days. And all Soren could do was watch. Watch as the man who claimed to love him tore apart kingdoms for his sake. Watch as the once mighty emperor reduced himself to madness, all for him. It was terrifying. It was intoxicating. It was love in its rawest, most unhinged form. And for the first time, Soren felt something stir deep within his heart. Not fear, not amusement, but a dark, undeniable affection. There was no escape from Dorian, not from his love, not from his obsession. No matter how far he ran, no matter how many walls he built, the Emperor would always find him. And perhaps Soren no longer wanted to run. As Dorian knelt before him, pressing blood-stained lips against the back of his hand, Soren whispered the words he never thought he would say. "My Emperor." Dorian looked up, his crimson eyes burning with an almost feral devotion. "Say it again." A slow smile curled on Soren's lips. He leaned down, his voice a mere breath against Dorian's skin. "My love." And just like that, the Queen of Drakensval surrendered, not as a prisoner, but as a willing captive in the arms of the man who would kill for him. The war was over, and in its place, an undying love was born. Epilogue: Eternal Devotion. Their love was sealed in blood and fire, but it was consummated in the quiet of their chambers. That night, Soren did not resist. He did not fight against the hands that held him, nor the lips that worshipped him. He accepted Dorian's love, his obsession, his all-consuming devotion. And in that moment, when their bodies intertwined under the glow of moonlight, Soren knew there was no one else for him. Only Dorian. Months passed and something changed within Soren. It was subtle at first, the exhaustion, the heightened senses, the way his body ached in ways it never had before. He dismissed it, until one fateful morning when the palace physician knelt before him, voice trembling as he uttered the words that would alter their lives forever. "You are with child, your majesty." Soren's world stilled. A child. Dorian's child. Their child. He had expected many things in his life. War, betrayal, even death. But never this. Never the warmth that bloomed in his chest as he cradled his stomach, as he imagined a life growing within him. Dorian's reaction was instant. He held Soren as though he were made of the most delicate glass, his crimson eyes filled with something beyond love, something akin to worship. "You have given me the greatest gift," Dorian whispered, his voice raw with emotion. "You have made me whole." The months of pregnancy were not easy. Dorian refused to let Soren lift even a finger, surrounding him with the finest healers, the best comforts. He was suffocating, overbearing, but Soren found himself smiling more often than not. Because for all his madness, for all his obsession, Dorian loved him. And Soren, in turn, had come to love him just as fiercely. When the time came, the palace trembled with the cries of their newborn twins. Two perfect children, one with Dorian's fierce crimson eyes, the other with Soren's golden gaze. They were a union of two empires. A symbol of love that had once been born in deception, but had flourished into something real, something unbreakable. Dorian held their children as though they were his entire world. And in truth, they were. Years passed, and the war became a distant memory. Peace flourished, and under the rule of Emperor Dorian and Queen Soren, Drakensval and Lunareth thrived as one. Soren no longer questioned the depth of Dorian's love. He no longer feared it, because in the end, he had drowned in it willingly, and he had never been happier.